We're very pleased to have Giovanni come and join us. And we're very pleased, I'm very pleased, that instead of me doing the pre-conversation and the interrogation and the questioning and the moderation, that Amy has so kindly said that she will do this. Many people are beginning to take this moderators, curators thing off my shoulders. Right now, moderators, but soon somebody, Amy and I are chatting about Amy taking the curation thing off my shoulders for a little while as well. So we're looking forward to that. And then it'll be something that's between the Drama School Mumbai and Embodied Poetics. And then eventually it'll be something between Drama School Mumbai and Embodied Poetics and somebody else. And then eventually it'll become like a banyan tree, Amy. But we won't talk about that right now. The conversations were prompted because when we got into lockdown, I really didn't know what the hell we were going to do. There was a lot of shock. There was a lot of everything that, it's been a universal experience for all of us in different ways. But speaking as a head of an institution trying to run a studio conservatory program in India, in Mumbai, I had lots of questions and no answers, and I needed to reach out to people and ask them how they were solving it. And so after about 2 or 3 conversations with different heads of schools and different people I knew, I realized that we were all in the same conundrum and we were all saying the same things to each other. And maybe it was more important that we don't have these conversations. I mean, yes, always have a one-on-one conversation, but we should also start talking in a forum where we can hear each other because we're all saying the same things and there's some good stuff there. For all of you who have attended previous Unrehearsed Futures, I hope you got the email from me. Simon, just as a test, did you get an email from me with a whole bunch of things in it? Just checking.
Yes, I did. Yes,
oh,
I did.
Great.
Thank you. Yeah.
Oh, great. I'm glad. Okay, so that was just a random check. Daniel, you got one as well? Yes, great. Brilliant. So the whole point was to build this community. And in those emails is a history of everyone who's spoken. There have been 6 talks so far. We've had talks by heads of school, the Institute of Arts Barcelona, Drew Mulligan, Edward Hicks. We've had talks by teachers in the room. So Judith was there and she spoke about voice training. Sita Mani was there. She talked about, from Colombia, she spoke about movement. We had a great mind in the room, Felipe Cervera, who promised me that he would emerge from his hole in September, but he's not here, so I shall go and hunt him down later. Felipe spoke about the new possibilities of this world and the realizations of this, and there was a very sort of, it was a good conversation. All of these conversations are available to all of you, and that's what I shared in the mail. And if you ever want to see one of those conversations again, please just reach out to us and we will make sure that they are there. And we're trying to put them all up on YouTube so you can see them. And Falguni, who's here, Falguni, where are you? We should acknowledge you because of all the amazing work you've been doing behind the scenes. Falguni, can you get off and say hi to everyone so you get seen? Voice. Falguni, Hetal taught you voice, use it.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yes, great. Yeah, so Falguni has been, Falguni had a previous life as a journalist and a reporter. And then she was recently an alumni of the Drama School Mumbai. She was in the COVID disrupted batch. And she has been writing up all of the reports from Unrehearsed Futures into nice pieces of reportage, which are going down they're going down okay, right? Judith, Amy, they were decent? Good.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Good. Great. So really, there you go. Shruti has written in for recordings of previous conversations. Please email us. And to read the reportage pieces, they are going to be released on the website very soon. But that was the first phase. And then we took a break as the Drama School Mumbai went on to launch our foundation course in acting and theatre making, in brackets, digital. We decided to not use the word online in the front of it because we realized that the course was a solid course that we're very happy with in terms of pedagogy. And it just happens that this particular delivery of that course is digital. And one day that brackets will turn to blended, and one day that brackets will turn to in person, and one day that brackets will go, what pandemic? So we hope that will happen. And so all of that happened, and that was why we had a gap last week. But in conversations with various people, and Amy included, we thought it'd be good to now sort of take the questions that were asked in the first 6 conversations and then start focusing areas on them. And one of the conversations is this conversation that we're having today. and the title we have today. Amy, the title again, because I don't have my notes in front of me.
This is Unearthing Theater. This is the title that Joe and I came up with in a devising session.
Right. Oh, great. Unearthing Theater. And the format is Amy's to run, but we usually have opening remarks by the panelists. And then somewhere, the panelists also don't have all the answers. We know this. So there are questions. And we ask the questions to all of you, and we all have a conversation. And so it takes about 20 to 40 minutes for the opening remarks and the opening round, and then the conversation grows out, and then we do a hard stop at 5:15 India time, which is an hour and 10 minutes from now. Yes?
Hey.
Without any further ado, and I will leave you there. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Unrehearsed Futures, session 7. Giovanni Fusetti in conversation with Amy Russell.
Woo-hee-hoo.
Yay, virtual party. Woohoo. Great. Thank you, Jehan. So it's really a pleasure to be occupying your role and Chanakya's role when I was being interviewed. So I have a sense of the continuity. It's sort of a little tradition that's being started here. And I think it's really important. I really want to frame, based on the previous experiences that I've had with Unrehearsed Futures, to frame what Giovanni and I are going to talk about tonight. Because I think that we're both, very keen that we not occupy a role of naysayer. This is not about naysaying the incredible possibilities of technology and of the virtual world as it develops. I think we both understand, as particularly international nomads, the virtue of having the virtual to connect us, because, for example, Giovanni and I have talked more during lockdown than we do normally. It's a wonderful thing. It's really kind of instigated a lot of international conversation and collaboration. So that is the context of our remarks. Is really, we were sort of brainstorming, and I came up with this word, retrophacy. What is a retrospective prophecy? What is a prophecy that you deliver in the moment about the moment that you're in? So this is sort of the idea that we had, was a kind of retrophacy about the here and now. And Giovanni and I have known each other for a very long time, since 1997, when we trained with Monsieur Lecoq together as pedagogic apprentices. And that was a wonderful period of time, when we sort of, a lot of things were launched, a lot of conversations were launched. And since that time, Giovanni, who's already a natural scientist, and I have developed as Gestalt therapists. So we share that background. We're both Gestalt, practicing Gestalt, Gestaltists. And Gestalt psychotherapy really informs a lot of I think definitely my perspective on this topic. And I know it does yours as well, Giovanni. And so I was going to give a little bit of a sort of introduction to that, because it's really Gestalt being founded on Gestalt psychology, which is about the relationship between figure and ground. So the emergence of figures against a background. So you could see a prophecy or retrophacy as a kind of emerging figure against a certain background. And so with that in mind, Joe, I wanted to ask you what you think are the emerging figures from this particular time. What are the emerging gestalts?
That's a fantastic question. Thank you, Amy, and thank you everybody for being here, or wherever we are in this strange place. And thank you, Jehan, for the invitation. So what I am seeing, in Gestalt, we ask a question: what is happening? What is the phenomenon that I can observe and describe, and therefore I can communicate? And for me, the most amazing thing that I've seen since the pandemic is this massive migration into the virtual space, or the cyberspace. And this was already happening, so it's not something new, but it was already happening it's been going on for a while, but the speed in which the collective has moved online was extraordinary. And of course, there is a reason, because of the contagion and the fear of contagion and pandemics and all that. But still, I was quite shocked by how quickly because I'm currently in Italy. I'm in Padua, northeast of Italy. So just to frame, I'm in this town called Padua, near Venice. And so the lockdown happened here on the 9th of March. So in that period of March, April. And I was amazed by watching how we talked about this process of moving online. First was an emergency. It was like, okay, this is an emergency and let's just hold on. Then was an adaptation. And then the third week was somehow something sort of an evolution. And then was a progress. And now is the future, which is like, wow, that was a little quick. So this is the first figure that I see is the speed in which this process has happened, as if, we can replace a lot of what we had before with what we can create on these wonderful machines. And that is, for me, was pretty shocking. The retrophacy was like, oh wow, that was quick. Remember in 2020 when you all moved online and then we never got out? It's like, whoa, that was quick.
And you when we were talking about this, you were seeing this against a cultural background, which the emerging gestalt of really centuries. You were looking at the mind-body split as a kind of way in which this figure has been developing.
Yeah, that's a long story. So here we are. I'm going to give a brief history of philosophy in a couple of minutes. And you will, for those who know me, by the way, I have a little joy attack in seeing faces of people I know. It's like, oh my God, they're still there. They still exist. They're like, ha ha ha. So my body goes, oh my God, I know that person. We have a body together. So it makes it like instant joy. So etymology, those who know me, they know I'm passionate about the etymos. Etymos is the root of the word. Why one day our ancestor decided, I need a word to say, to express what I'm actually feeling or thinking. So digital, digits are the fingers, right? So we're talking about a world that is moved by fingers. Then you have manual, mani, and then we have physical, physis, which is nature in Greece. So this story of the progressive abandonment of the physis of nature is very long, very, very long. And I just a few quotes. Mr. Parmenides, are you familiar with that guy? It was a man, very important, a philosopher, a Greek philosopher, a male philosopher, of course. And in 5th century before Christ, he came to this wonderful conclusion that thinking and being are the same. How smart. Thinking and being is the same. 5th century before Christ, dear old Greek people. And then Plato came and he said, well, actually, this reality is not real reality. The real reality is ideas, the concept that I can think. It's called idealism. And those people created something called metaphysics, beyond physics, beyond nature. And the problem that I have is that in this beyond nature, there is a rank and a value system. And just to provoke a little our mind, we decided, the people who started this technology started talking about virtual reality as opposed to real reality. And the problem is that virtual has a rank over real, because virtus is like, is a value. So we start hearing this virtual versus real, which is not neutral, virtual. Oh, wow. The virtues, this is a virtual world. So therefore it's much better than the real world with all this physical constraint and all that stuff that you have to take care of, like eating and breathing and pooping and all that thing, like physics. So this is the long story. And the ranking of the intellect, the neocortex, the idea, the thoughts over the physis, the nature, is long story. And then the Christian came with this wonderful concept of, in the beginning, it was the Word. For those of you who are familiar with the Gospel, this is the first line of Gospel of St. John, who says, in the beginning, it was the Word. Like we come to life, is that the Word? Do we come to life like that? Hello, Mom. Hello, Dad. Nice to see you. To be or not to be? No, that's a bullshit idea. Sorry for all the Christian in the room. And, in the beginning, so I come from that story. I was Catholic. I grew up in this culture that was very much into this world. And the physis, nature, has been dismissed versus the thoughts, the mind, the ideas. And still from my culture, I come from Italy, so Renaissance, wonderful. Renaissance is beautiful, isn't it? We go to Florence, fantastic, how beautiful. Unfortunately, Renaissance is also a series of wonderful models that postulates the superiority of the intellect on nature. So the Italian garden is a complete control of nature wilderness. And wilderness is considered to be regressive, primordial, and fundamentally evil. So all this is quite significant. So what I see happening is that the virtual is a fantastic world that is coming from that idea that we can be in charge of the world through our head and through the digital and not through the body. So, no, and we finish with the dear old Descartes, I think, therefore I am, which in Latin sounds cogitus ergo sum. And as a young man in high school, we all were, when we were studying philosophy, we were all joking on this cogitus ergo sum, turning into coitus ergo sum, which seems to be to us much more sound as cogito ergo sum. So the coitus ergo sum is the side of myself that brought me to study physical theater, in which the question is, in the beginning, it was a gesture. And the word will appear from the body and not vice versa. So it's intense and makes me quite angry when I talk about it, because behind this virtual world, there is an epidemic of control, which I find it more complicated and more dangerous than the epidemic of the pandemics of the damn COVID, which is, of course, pain in the ass. Sorry about that, but what's happening beyond that, it disturbs much more.
Mm. Yes, I mean, you came up with these sort of wonderful alternative statements, which I'm going to put into the chat. I feel, therefore I am, and in the beginning was the gesture. Yeah. So alternative slogans to the sort of slightly tyrannical Western influence of philosophy. So Joe, you were talking about a movement into the virtual as an opting out of ecology. Where do you connect ecology specifically to this? How do you consider ecology?
So this is my body, physical means nature. This is my nature, my physical body. And before being a citizen, I am a primate. And before being a primate, I'm a mammal. So my oikos ecology comes from oikos is the home. Same word, ecology and economy. Economy is the norms of the house, the rules of the house. And ecology is the logos, the speech, the discourse, the understanding of the house. So my home is my body. And my body is, as part of nature, is intrinsically is relational, because I am in contact with the ecosystem around me. I need to breathe fresh air, at least not poisonous air. I need to eat and drink. I need to protect myself from I need shelter, but also need relational life. I need social contact. I need physical contact with other humans. And I am a mammal. And I'm amazed of how little we are talking about our needs as mammal in this time of lockdown. I'm a mammal, meaning that I was born, as a mammal, I spent the first part of my existence inside another mammal, which is my mom. Mammal comes from that. And then I come out of it. And for a very long time, and it's an incredibly significant time, I am completely physically intertwined with another human being. And then my body includes her and my family and my house and my toys and my pet. We all remember that. We all remember that, the life of a child is an ecosystem of physical interactions. And we have everybody has a memory of that. And then the school comes and you have to go to school, fair enough. And then you learn that there is work, and then there is play, and then you study, and then there's playtime, and then you become blah, blah, blah. You all know that stuff. So the consequence of this abandonment of the body are ecological, because while we are migrating online, we are abandoning the natural space. And this comes with terrible consequences, because I think many of us are very little engagement with the actual caring of the physical space around us. And I noticed during this pandemic, one of the things that I started doing it, which was like kind of bizarre, I started picking up rubbish in my room, in my street. And whenever I go, I pick up a little bit of rubbish. And I thought, why am I doing this? Well, because I need to take care of a physical space, not just my home, my house, but just outside. So the fact of leaving and thinking that we can transform our daily life with a significant part of creation of time and space over this virtual world, as a consequence that the society is abandoning the basic manual care of the physical space. So, and this again, etymology, we talk about natural versus artificial. And artificial means that is made with art, is man-made, something that is being made by man versus something that is being native to nature, that was generated by nature itself. So I'm disturbed by this because I see that this migration online as a very bizarre decision that I don't think corresponds to, certainly not to my needs as a mammal. Because as a mammal, I don't want to hear anything about, my mammal brain goes like, ah! I don't want to hear about the pandemic. I don't even understand the word pandemics. I just, where is my mom? Where's my brother? Where's my toy? Where's my pet? Where are my people? Where are my friends? Where are they? Where are they? So my mammal body like, and you know, I need to, so I miss my embodiment as a physical theater practitioner tremendously. I miss it physically. I start studying myself like that, and you know, there is it's an emotional, like, it's like, it's a gesture that wants to appear, and okay, I can't do that. I could do a class, no, I can't. No, I can't. Hallelujah. And this alone that can't happen becomes a sort of a low-key depressive state. Well, okay, well, and that's like, pisses me off. So I love the possibility that we can have an interaction through these machines, but this is a surrogate to something that I am terribly starving for, and I'm cultivating that craving because that craving makes me feel that I'm still alive. The moment I stop craving and I accept junk food, then I'm in trouble.
So this word surrogate that you mentioned, it came up also when I was talking with Chanakya a month ago. And it's really a question for theater practitioners in the sense of, if we go online, if we migrate online and we do what we're going to maybe perhaps even call theater online, are we proposing a surrogate form of theater? So in our conversations, it was really trying to come up with a functional definition of what we're calling theater that would, in a sense, resist a movement into the virtual. So this idea of co-regulation of the shared body, which we teased out, an idea that in a theater space, we actually physically co-regulate each other. There's a co-regulation that goes on between performer and audience and between audience members that resembles this kind of mammalian
yes.
group body that you're talking about. So it's a kind of co-regulated space, physically co-regulated space in theater.
Yes, because one of the realization I had during this sort of in my practice is that in the Lecoq sort of a lineage, Lecoq sort of a slang or jargon, we use the word the poetic body, which is also the title of his book. Now, one of the biggest realization I had after a few years after I was in the work is that the poetic body is collective, is not individual. That's why all the experience of chorus, of band, of flocking, or bouffon, or just the whole ensemble concept is so powerful in that particular lineage, because the poetic body is collective. It includes not just my body, but the bodies of my fellow performers, the body of the audience, the props, the space, the stage. So that body is like quantum physics. It's like a wave. It's not a particle. So that thing for me needs to be preserved, and that experience of that is the part of the theatrical process that gets sort of filtered out in the media, in the digital mediatic process, because we cannot hold that. We can hold some space together, but we cannot hold that poetic body that collective, that, you know, that creates, you know, co-regulation is, it means that my emotions make sense and meaning thanks to the emotion of my fellow humans. So we wave each other into a common ground where we feel with what we are feeling. That's a term, co-regulation. It comes from neurobiology, and it is usually used for the baby that co-regulate, the child that co-regulate with his parents, with his mom in particular, mom or their mom. So I remember vividly, I mean, this is a common experience of every teacher, how deeply interactive is a collective group of practitioners being together practicing, or how much the audience influence the show. And some shows are nice, some runs are completely different than others because of that co-creation that happens between the performers and the audience. And I think this is something that, for me, it's hard to imagine how that can survive to the digital translation, where we become 211210001, and then we go through, and then we appear on the other side as 1001, and in the meantime, a lot of stuff is lost.
Mm. It's interesting as people who want to maintain this shared space of co-regulation, we perhaps have an option to use the virtual to inspire people to go back into contact with their co-regulated space. So for example, in the workshop that I'm teaching with Drama School Mumbai, which was the first title was Rewild Your Living Room. It's a workshop that specifically puts people into relationship with their physical, tangible living room. So so when we were talking about this, you were mentioning the Italians who went out on their balconies and sang to one another. It's an opportunity for us, if we're given the privilege and the opportunity to inspire people and work with them through this period of time, to keep on reminding them of the shared space that they can create that they can continue to do work in, you know, with social distancing. They can continue to, what would you say would be the way forward if you want to use the virtual, which is, or use the sort of dissemination of knowledge through the virtual to get people to move back into the shared space?
Yes, I think that this is a great catch somehow, because internet, like the Zoom, there is a collective space that we can nurture, in the sense that we can inspire each other in all sort of ways. And the question is, where are the ingredients of theater right now? So for instance, if theater is a shared space between a poet, a performer, and a watcher, an audience, where are the audience now? Where can I perform? For who? Maybe it's just for the neighbor, or for the children on the other side of the streets, or from the balcony, or to walk out in the streets as a character, or perform. There are people in this assembly here listening. They are doing something very quite wild, and I'm talking to the band of the COVID bubble there. I would call them to tell us what they're doing, because there are crazy things. They're not so crazy. It's just regaining the public space with performance. They are close to, you know, some sort of basking in social distancing versus just bringing out some sort of storytelling character. In this period of this particular period here in Italy, all theaters were closed. So in the beginning, there was no performance everywhere. And then the regulations started becoming more loose. So we started seeing that something was possible to be performed online, not online, but on air, outdoor. So with a group of different companies here in Padova, we created a festival, and this festival had 4 different groups that were playing outdoor in sort of villas and gardens with very strict rules, social distancing, very little audience distance from the chair, etc. And and we managed to do something. And I myself was doing a Buffon character that was keeping people distant. I was dressed up as a virus, and I was sanitizing hand of people, and singing songs. And that was super fun, and everybody loved the fact that we could actually still do something even with all this limitation. So if we can gather together online and say, okay, where is gone? Where is theater? Not in the hall, not in the theater, not here, not there. Well, where is it? Whenever there are people that who wants to storytell to each other, well, then theater appears and the muses will be there.
Well, this is perhaps a really good time to turn to our very sizable audience and ask what you think about this. What are your ideas? What are your inspirations? Oh, we're not supposed to scream, Joe. That's very hard for people who have headphones on. Curb your enthusiasm. Sorry about that to Stephen. Sorry. So who would like to, yeah, anybody would like to share about this? Thoughts, reflections, questions? From the house.
I could start with one, and then, but I really do hope that other people come in. When you took us through the kind of the progressive sort of abandonment of nature, and we went into ideas and concepts, but I just know that this mind, you know, and then with this body-brain divide, that is what I kept hearing in the whole thing. But I also, like, the brain and thought cannot exist without the embodied experience, right? So somewhere I'm also seeing a cyclical loop. One cannot exist without the other. Whereas this story of the pandemic and how we've moved from and the longer story of how we've moved from absolute nature and the sound to this sort of intellectual thought, it's a very linear story, right? But is it actually not linear because it's actually loops, because one without the other? One cannot, one has never in the entire history of time, one has not existed without the other. I cannot think if I don't have a body that, you know, eats, sleeps, goes and poos and nourishes itself. I cannot sit there and go, you know, I think therefore I am, unless somebody went, I had coitus and therefore he is, right? So it's not, this progressive abandonment, you know, it sounds like a line, but I'm thinking of more of a spiral where you have to keep coming back into the body in order to go into the intellect. You have to keep coming back into the body in order to go to the digital, to the technological. Because now you have, you know, Elon Musk demonstrated pigs with nerve transmitters in it. And it just seems like that loop. You can't have one without the other. So where does that fit into your narrative of the abandonment of the body?
Well, it's a great question. Now, there are some people, they're called transhumanists, who are actually thinking and waiting for the moment they can upload their brain into a USB drive, and there will be it. And these people are so smart that when they die, they have their head chopped off and conserved frozen somewhere in Arizona in a hangar. This is true stuff. So I'm concerned about this idea, which is a terrible idea. But it's true what you say. There are loops. And so there are loops. Now, the loops might take a very long time. So this loop might be a loop that will go into a very serious collective disembodiment with terrible ecological consequence. And then we will have to change and go back to the body. As they say in if you're familiar with Overshoot Day, you know, the day in which the Earth is sort of ends its natural resources and we start using up the resource of next year. In that website, you find lots of interesting things. And there's one wonderful line that says, sustainability, we should think in terms of sustainability by design and not by disaster. So we might return to the body because we will have to fight for the salads and the tomatoes, which would be unfortunate. But I think that in this current moment, I see much more energy towards the artificial intelligence quest and the control over nature through machines than the other way around. So it's true, we need to return to the body, you know, at least to eat, etc. But the cultural phenomena that I see, from my perspective, I see much more energy and commitment and design, a huge amount of design into this process. And for me, that's a disturbing event. And I like to say I've worked most of my career a lot with clown, and I used to define clown work as a very serious work on how to be stupid. Now I've upgraded my definition, and my definition includes this, that I will oppose artificial intelligence with natural stupidity. And this is what I remind everybody, like, hey, stupidity means to be stupid, means to be stupefied, meaning I don't know. I feel and I have no idea. And I'm a naturally stupid being. And artificial intelligence postulates the fact that we can create a machine which is more intelligent than me. And that is the most stupid idea that I ever can conceive. So I see a lot of design in that direction, and that disturbs me.
We have a question from Daniel about what etymologically you would come up with to refer to the digital audience, because we have in theater the audience refers to listening, audio listening, spectateurs, watching. What would you say would be an appropriate term if you were being a creative etymologist for the audience? What are we now? Here we in this mosaic, rather bugs like a insect eye, or thousands of little eyes. What are we?
Well, first, Zoom has 3 letters in common with zoo. So what I see that we are a zoo with animals caged into digital boxes. And I think it's a pretty fun revenge of Mother Nature on this. So after all we've done to the wilderness, now we found ourselves in zoos, in digital zoos, which is pretty fun. So what are the audience of a digital performance or a digital event? Are they digital audience? Are they audience digits? You know, digi audience? I don't know. Please feel free to add one. Audience, which publico. We're part of something. I don't know. I don't know. The words, I failed the words to describe this process, because I constantly connect with how do I feel when I'm sitting here in front of the machine. And there's a mix of excitement of being in contact, joy of seeing faces of people I know and love, and this distress of not being able to reach out. So there's a mix of joy and kind of something scary, a kind of animal terror, and at the same time. So when I finish this, I'm excited and like, what was that? And where is everybody? As I finish this, I go like, where is everybody? Which is very bizarre. So I don't have words for that digital audience. Is it not a spectator? Is it an expression?
I don't know what you would think of this, Giovanni or Daniel, but there's this sort of, there's the wonderful panopticon of Foucault, and here we are all busy muting ourselves and turning off our videos and being terribly self-regulated. And of course, it's a space also which is extremely easily regulated. It's far more easily regulated than any of the shared space that we might find ourselves in. Because of course the content can be scanned very efficiently. So there's a kind of panoptical quality to the audience, perhaps. I don't know.
Well, I was not going to enter in the political consequence of what's happening, which are very scary too. Because imagining a world in which people will be sitting in their houses, on their homes, interacting through machines is like, the best controllable audience ever. So yeah, that is a whole entire science fiction scenario. But is somebody listening to this conversation? If some of us say something not politically correct or acceptable, will there be consequences? So this is, I always think if the Gestapo of 1940 or the Italian fascists of 1940 had this technology, where would it be now? So if this technology goes in the hand of somebody who's not too well-intentioned, ouch, ouch. I wonder what Bertolt Brecht would write now about that. So this is to me very disturbing. So my anarchic, I have an anarchist in my psyche, is like well alert of what's happening. Because somehow this can be the end of the political life that we know. Because the end of gathering is the end of politics. Polis is the city. Is there a virtual polis? Polis, like polis, the city. Is there a virtual community? Yes, there is. What is the power that is left to a virtual community? This is scary stuff, in my view.
So this is the retrophacy aspect. I mean, what I'm wondering is, you know, Gestalt also really celebrates this idea of responsibility. So it's a kind of working with the term responsibility to focus on the ability to respond, responsibility. So here we are. We're all responsible. You know, that's why we're here. So what are some of our responses? What is responsible? I mean, it would really be great to hear from the zoo. Please, Freddie. Yeah, just you. I think we can unmute ourselves, or if
Hello?
you want to put in the chat.
Yes, please.
Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. I have a response/question for Amy. You mentioned your performative ecology workshop that's coming up, which is about sort of connecting with the environment around you immediately. And I really like that idea because initially that sort of seems like a resort because theatres are closed and we don't have these physical areas to go to, but there's also something that's really democratizing about that, because a lot of the times when we're in theatres, there's you know, a program and an agenda of what we're seeing, and if we're just creating theatre in our living room, then we have a lot more control over that. And I really like that in terms of, yeah, that's really cool. So I was wondering if you could just go into detail a little bit more about the workshops and the course and what you'll do there.
Well, yeah, thanks. I mean, it's been a real discovery. I mean, I'm working basically with a type of viewpointing, but it's always in relationship to the apartment. So it's using the viewpoint of architecture essentially. But it's really amazing the kinds of relationships, ecological relationships you can fantasize and discover in a space that is so lived in. You know, that has been really essentially so claustrophobic, and suddenly it becomes this kind of a space of speculation where you could discover different subjectivities. But I do think there is something democratic about the movement into your own living space. And I'm reminded of one of our teachers from the Lecoq School, Sandra Mladenovic, who was this wonderful, wild Croatian teacher. And she, during during the most, I think, repressive aspect of Tito's regime, they practiced what they called apartment theater. And I translated one of her plays, which included all the recipes. She was a very avid cook. And basically, you would invite people into your flat and you would stage a very thinly veiled conversation about politics, but it was always with food and so forth. So it's really smart, you know, subversive theater. Very, very, you know, if you could imagine it now with our little bubbles of, you know, who can be considered a safe company. It's perfectly coronavirus applicable. So it's this kind of thing. It's sort of provocative use of a domestic space. I think that's you're right. I think it has a real democratic potential. I agree. Yeah, thanks. There's a question from Kali. Oh, sorry, before that, Sarah. Does the disembodiment that comes with the digital world not mean that we need to look at experience words speaking differently? Words as bodies that we can hear in space rather than see in space. That could also be embodied. So there's a possibility for embodied language.
Can you repeat the question?
So it's in the chat. It's disembodiment. So it's looking if we can, if words and language has a kind of body to it. I mean, it's not visible, but it affects us in a physical way. Mm-hmm. So words therefore be a way that embodiment can be transmitted across these different media. Mm. Is that what you're getting at, Sarah?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I think so, yeah. I think that the voice is still a phenomenal source of communication and meaning and sense. So definitely we could pay more attention to how we speak, what words we speak. Absolutely, yes. I think that's, you know, this reminds me of the complete revolution in communication that the radio produced in the world, when people could actually hear voices and words of meaningful words and news and stories on the radio was extraordinary. The oral expansion of the world. So yes, absolutely. I think we might pay attention to that much more.
Yeah.
There's a question from Kali. Isn't this universal comfort in disembodiment the result of global trauma that lives in the physical body? Don't we have to make the physical body habitable again? And how do we do that on a large scale? This is the trauma question, where this the disembodiment actually, in a sense, could be seen as a repetition of systemic trauma.
Yes, I think you caught it. I do think this is a true affirmation. And one of the consequences of trauma is the abandonment of the body, of the numbness of the body. So I think that it is evident that we are collectively living with a lot of collective trauma of all kinds. So, you know, to talk about collectively healing, it's a gigantic question. You know, Wilhelm Reich, the great psychoanalyst from Germany, you know, creator of bioenergetic and all that work, he had this idea, like, you know, we need to bring back to the people the tools of healing and therapy on a large scale. So I don't know. This is a huge question for me, and my answer is to work locally with the people that I work with, being aware of that very often the you know, the physical and emotional wound are there, and they appear in the form of gestures. So any somatic practitioners know that. I wish there was more collective political and educational awareness of this particular question, because I don't see it at all. And this is disturbing. So I don't have an answer, but this is pretty true. And I think it comes back to what I was saying in the beginning, that this process of disembodied is certainly helped by the fact that we might feel safer online because of the contagion, fair enough, but it might feel safer online also because the intensity of the contact and the potential of the conflict and the, you know, the other is an alteration of the self. So without the other, we might feel safe, but that's a terrible perspective. So I don't have an answer on this, but I think this is a crucial question. And the community we will have to deal with this. And what's happening now in the US is very powerful, because there is a collective response to an obvious systemic trauma. And a lot of people are saying, basta, we're not going to take it anymore. And this is very touching to me, because they're just like, okay, that's enough. So how do we go collectively on the various levels of trauma that we as groups or societies and different culture, different gender, different people will have different levels of trauma. So it's quite fascinating.
Any other thoughts and ideas about what we can responsibly do in these times?
Hello,
Yes.
Melvin has a question. I have a question. So what I hear being said by you, Giovanni, is that in this virtual digital storytelling, art, poetry, theatre, in many ways, is inferior to the real thing. You know, it's somehow a surrogate for the real thing. What kind of damage do you think, like, where is the damage? Is it in the artist's psyche? Is it scrambling up their expectations? Is it the collective field of poetry that the quality is being lessened, that then will scramble all our expectations about what's good art and what's bad art and what, you know, blah, blah, blah? Like, where is the damage going to be, if you can foresee that or have an idea around that?
Ooh, that's a complex question, because it's, I mean, I don't think I'm in a position to, I can't have hypothesis based on what I have experienced myself and on my, both as a person and as a practitioner. Maybe the damage is possibly, I might use another word, I would see as there's going to be some loss and some reorganization of our there's going to be a repatterning of our brain, our functions. And I bring an example of what happens to the young generation now, that they are given digital devices very, very soon as a form of co-regulation. I think it's something similar. So they're going to learn to co-regulate with machines versus with people. Clown doctors are replaced right now by, virtual reality glasses and by little tiny funny robots that plays with the kids. The kids love the little robot. Now, so I think it's more like we are repatterning our neural system to work and play and love and learn like this. So there are going to be some losses and some consequences. From my perspective, I would see that there is some, the damage is an intense word, but there are going to be a loss of a whole variety of experiences. And then you might argue there are going to be other experiences. Yes, but certainly something that is going to be a loss is a collective body. The experience of the collectivity of an action, and the feeling of being held by a group, actually held, and the self disappearing into an us that happens when you are working together. That stuff online, it can't happen in the same way. Something else might happen, I don't know, but I am, I'm really anchored in this time. I anchor myself to my primate mammal nature, and I listen from that brain, the limbic brain, more than the cortex. The cortex makes sense of this. The limbic says, like, wait a second, where is everybody? So I'm concerned. One of my points now, I've been using Zoom and this media with quite a lot, but mainly, almost only with people, colleagues or students that I had already an experience of the live experience of the body and theater before. So we sort of held the space together. But at the moment, I cannot see how I could initiate new students to some of this practice online. I can initiate to something, I can certainly do something, but some of this practice cannot exist without the actual live shared, as Amy, you say, shared space and time and together. So it's, we're going to lose we're going to lose something and gain something. And yeah.
It's an interesting thing, this, the evidence that we might have that there is a group body. I think this is one of the most numinous questions. What is the group body? How do I know that there is a group body? We talk about, you've cited the powerful example of human children and human infants. But then, we say, no, well, we grow up. So, do we really need that anymore? And I moved to Britain in my 30s and was very surprised by this very unusual phenomena in London, that people are constantly apologizing to you. There's this perpetual, everything that's sorry, you'll say sorry, many, many times a day. And some of the most extraordinary instances of being apologized to were when someone went into the airspace above my head to remove their briefcase from the rack, or to flick a newspaper in my direction. No, this is extraordinary. And I used to think this was really strange, but I think it's actually a very insightful, it's showing that people are aware of the space between. There's something, they know that they are in relationship to you in a way that might have disturbed your, personal bubble. So it's sort of, there are these tiny bits of evidence, but I think the group body has become so difficult to identify,
Yeah, because
when does a crowd become a mob? When does a group become a group? These are hard to identify moments.
Yes, also because I'm 54, so I'm sort of I came through an education system that certainly has changed somehow. But most educational experience I have had never even mentioned the fact that there was an emotional life of the group. And I went to learn this later on when I started de-learn a lot of crap that I had studied and go and study something else. And one of the most extraordinary experiences I had when I went to HELIKOS school was like this just incredible, amazing experience of moving together with people without having to say one word and having to explain nothing, without any book, nothing. And wow, I want to do this forever. After 5 years at the university where everything was, you talk about things all the time and you do nothing. That was my experience at school. Nothing. We did nothing for years and years. Just talk and talk and talk and think and talk and talk and talk. And then recreation. Hey! Sorry, shouting. Go out and then come back. Let's talk. And then physical education, sport. And then let's talk. I mean, that's terrible stuff. I never a teacher in my entire high school asking, Giovanni, how do you feel about what you wrote? Never. 5 years. What kind of a system is that? I mean, I was probably unlucky and a terrible teacher, blah, blah, blah.
I see.
Amy,
people...
can I?
Sorry, Daniel. Yeah.
Can I pop in? Just a whole series of connected thoughts. I think one of the things that happens when we're on Zoom, and this relates to an experience I had in China. I was in China in November and December. I don't think I brought Corona back to the UK. I hope I didn't, but I might have done, but I don't think so. The thing about Zoom is that you can do multiple things at the same time. You can be sending text messages, you can be sending emails. I've done both of those during this conversation. I know, but that's
not
the point.
Something I want to hear.
Yeah, well, you've been receiving some of them, so be quiet. But I had this experience in China. So I made a show in China in November, December, and the audience would come and watch the show. And a lot of the audience were on their mobile phones as they watched the show. Now, they had these little laser buttons to sort of zap people if they were taking photos or videos of the show. But otherwise, there was no issue. If you wanted to be on your phone at the same time as watching the show, you could do that. What was fascinating was the response after the show, where it felt like a totally normal audience response to the show, even from people who'd spent half the show on their mobile phones, if not the entire show on their mobile phones, WhatsApping their friends as they were watching it. And there's something about the multitasking. We've talked about how our brains are different. There was this big report in the UK about an audience sitting together, the heartbeat starts moving at the same time. People start feeling things and the heartbeat regulates. Now it feels like we're going into this space of multi-platform experiences and China was interesting because it might be, unfortunately, the future of this, where people are doing two things at the same time. And somehow they were still experiencing the show. They still gasped, they still laughed at all the right moments. And I couldn't understand it because they were on their mobile phones at the same time. It was a weird experience. Obviously, I was very unnerved at the beginning, but they responded. There's a thing that this Zoom space is opening up. Now, what I love about the theatre is it allows me to switch my mobile phone off for an hour and a half, 2 hours. I always judge the success of a show by how long it takes me to switch my mobile phone back on after the show. And if I don't do it for an hour and a half afterwards, I know I've seen a great show. Whereas if it's a terrible show, I switch it on as I'm leaving the theatre. So there is this relationship with technology. I think that this is something that's happening. And I think lots of people are comfortable about watching shows on Zoom because they can be doing something else at the same time. And there's this fear of, you only live once, time is short, why on earth would you? And yet we're losing that intrinsic experience of being with a group at the same time, all doing the same thing as an audience or as a team of, performers, makers, whatever. But I think there's something else happening. It's an evolution of our brains changing as they have done with the internet, with Google. I think that there is something happening, and this is contributing to that. Anyway, that was a long-winded.
Well, you found a response, Daniel, that the fact that people were gasping at different moments might actually...
It wasn't unfortunate. It was weird. I was like, wow, so they are engaged at the same time as being on their phones and WhatsApping. And, I watch people have an hour and a half WhatsApp conversation with a friend, sometimes talking about the show, going, oh my God, this guy's just said this, on stage, or this has just happened.
Right.
And other people were playing, Candy Crush whilst also watching, being with my show, but sort of somehow, I think just very advanced, being able to do two things at the same time.
So I think it points to increase of individualism now, and so that was something that you and I were talking about, Joe. Was that this is definitely a movement towards a more individual space. I mean, people will have much more individualized reactions to a show. It's definitely in the way of individualism. If we push individualism, then this is perhaps one of the directions that it's taking us in further. But if we're interested in the collective, then the tension might be let out of the room to some degree. It's less of a collective, maybe. I don't know. Jehan, you were going to say?
I'm just going to throw this out there because it's also this is extremely, a lot of this is going to take a while. I need to create a dictionary now, which is good because understanding where the meanings of things came from gives me a sense of what my purpose is. But here, I mean, Gio, I spoke to you about this the other day offline, and Amy, this also came up in the conversation with you from a lot of people from the schools in Australia who said, we have to go on now. Our circumstances require us to go on. I'm running a school. We have chosen to go on. There was the choice to stop and do nothing, but we chose to go on. And we chose to go on because we did not want to sit on our hands and do nothing in this time. So that's one. So then that comes to the question of initiation. What do we have to look for when initiating people? And how do we make that work? Or what do we carry forward with us? And what do we avoid? Somebody used the word damage. And how do we be mindful about the way we move forward? The second one, Amy, is also out of the conversation with you that we've had multiple times, but what are we preparing for so that when we come out or come at the end of this road, some of the students on the webinar are saying, should I wait for a course to come back, a normal course? And they made this metaphor of us being in a tunnel and waiting to come to the light at the end of the tunnel. And I said, said, it's not a tunnel. We're on a rocky patch of road and you can choose. I'm speaking from behalf of the school. We can choose to stay here, do nothing, and wait for the road to be built for us. Or we can keep negotiating this road and somewhere in the journey of that negotiation, learn something about ourselves and about our world and about us. And then when we hit smoother roads later on, or never hit smoother roads again, we can do something with it. And you spoke, and I know I'm conflating things, but you also spoke about when we can emerge out of this space. There must be something left behind, or there must be something we can fight back for or reclaim. So what is your advice to people starting an online 6-month online program right now?
Joe and I both suspended our schools, so that's been both of our choices. But I've just launched an online community course platform so that people can connect with each other online. So I think, I mean, for me, I'm really interested in keeping these conversations. I'm very interested in this conversation and being here with you and here with Giovanni is really looking at what, as you say, what can we prepare? What kind of rebound can we prepare? And I think your question about what are you initiating people into?
And what are you preparing them for?
Yeah, so it's an initiation course into what? Into what craft? Into what art form? There's certainly going to be no dearth of performance schools. I mean, if anything, there was some statistic that Netflix had, a new subscriber every second or every minute. It's like there's going to be no dearth of entertainment in the coming time. But so if we're initiating people or inaugurating people into performance, there's certainly going to be no shortfall, I think, in that sector. The question is really, what is theater? Are we just going to turn into, media departments? I mean, we should just, reconvert ourselves into, media practitioners and film experts. What is theater what is unique about it? And if this is where you keep on putting pressure on this idea of the group body or the shared time space. If that's not our medium somehow, then I think we should just be honest and just really skill up in film and TV. I mean, that would be the way forward. That's my thought about it. What do you think, Giovanni?
I think that theater, in order to, I mean, the question is, what will be the space for live storytelling in the future? Who will want to go to see a show? Who will want to be a storyteller instead of live storyteller? So, and this, there will always be somebody that will want to do that. Now, I expect that the demand for live entertainment of this kind will reduce, and I hope to be wrong, but I expect that the world after this will be more cautious about this particular, you know, there will be the contagion fear, which will linger for a while. Hopefully not. I mean, we have had much worse pandemic than this ones, and then theater came back pretty strong. So the pandemics will end. But in the meantime, there has been this mutation of a lot of the need for storytelling will be fulfilled by Netflix and everything else. So the question is the need for live entertainment in the form of stories, because live entertainment in the form of music will always remain, and dance will remain. They have a different rank and different dynamic. But the need for live interaction between people may decrease because of this. And if that is the case, then I need to become even more theatrical in our theatricality. So to make work even more clear that it cannot be replaced with anything else. A theatrical experience that has no comparison with anything else you can do, not as a student, not as a participant, not as a trainer, not as a teacher, and not as an audience member. So to create programs that are radically theatrical. Now, the absurd paradox that we can't do that online. So we're talking about preparing somebody to be very, very theatrical while being online. They're like, wow, it's a really wonderful conundrum question. So, you know, I don't know what to do, because at the moment I've suspended. I say I'm not teaching any new things online because I don't see how, what. One thing that certainly can be done is, for those who are familiar with the Lecoq approach, there is this notion of the levels of physical energy, or levels of tension, or levels of engagement of the body in space. Now, we should describe another exercise, which is the level of engagement with the space while we are on Zoom or online. So what does it mean to remain engaged while we have a conversation online? Or how can we hold together a space that has somehow a pre-theatrical pre-embodiment while we are online? Maybe that's something, I mean, there's certainly a program to organize around that. Can we get ready to be outside while we are here? Certainly. So there is probably a set of exercise and action that can be done. Voice work certainly can be done very accurately. That's no doubt. Movement work, movement analysis, and movement awareness. Certainly, there's sort of a thing that can be a preparation for, but the interaction between the person and the space, that can't happen. So I don't know. I really don't know. But and then, as somebody said, you create bubbles of where you will do exactly what we did before, but just including the quarantine as part of the training. And you have a quarantine, and then you hope you go and you do the class. And this means like creating bubbles of theater practitioners that will live like in a science fiction movie. You know, sort of the renegades of theater. What are they doing? They do theater and they grow cabbages or something. So, which I tend to think more like that to save myself from depression. I think like one day I will be in a farm with some crazy clown keep doing the thing while the world going nuts on screens. So I tend to think like that, though it is certainly very naive. But the word naive means native, so I'd rather to be native to my body than to a machine.
Well, we have an interesting, so Daniel, you're sharing that you're going to be going into a real rehearsal room for the next 6 months, making the show wearing masks. How interesting. Masks. The time has come for masks. So there's so many practitioners in the room.
I should say not with masks, as in the actors have chosen to wear face coverings.
Oh, I see.
In the rehearsal room.
Yeah. Well, but you know, this wonderful Commedia mask, which was born out of...
No, not those.
Oh,
not those that leave that space open. And this no, the actors, you know, it's a group of 9, and some of the actors, for reasons, have chosen to play it safe and want to rehearse with masks. It's going to be fascinating. I'll try and report back. I won't be able to attend these meetings over the next 6 weeks because I'll be doing that. But I'll sort of send back, you know, postcards from the front, and let you know how weird it is, you know, where actors can't come within 2 meters of each other, wearing masks, how that's going to change the experience in the rehearsal room. It's going to be weird.
I would like to add something. You know, historically speaking, we have records that at the end of the pandemics, there will be orgies in the city. And what we saw, what we saw here in Italy, that when people could go out from lockdown, the main thing that happened, they would go and drink out in the bar and just be like very close to each other and fuck all the regulations. So they were looking for ecstasy, a physical ecstasy. And this is a fact. So they're not going to come to see Hamlet after the pandemic is over, unless Hamlet is done in a very wild, ecstatic way. So what I'm saying here is that we need to think in terms of what kind of ecstatic physical experience we can provide to people that have experienced the fear of death, and therefore the euphoria of not being dead and wanting to fuck life again and get happy. So this is important. So that's a challenge. So I think as a practitioner, we have to come out with something pretty cool. Otherwise, people are not going to come to see a show. They will go and see a crazy concert. They will go to get drunk and have whatever ecstatic activity they can do after having survived a terrible time of lockdown, where the mammal and the reptilian were like, and so now let's get out. And I saw this in my town here. It was crazy. I mean, the first day after when the bar could open, people went nuts. The police and the army came to stop them from drinking Spritz and Prosecco. Like, so this gives me hope, because, you know, life will continue.
Joe, we have about 3 minutes left to conclude.
So my call is for ecstasy through theater.
Ecstasy through theater.
Yes.
That's a good
Yeah.
word. Shall I close this up and take us to the end, Amy, or do you have any closing marks?
Yeah.
Okay, so ecstasy through theater, great final thought. I honestly would not go and watch a play the second the lockdown.
Jehan, just there was one question from Ben that we missed.
Yes, I was going to address.
Really,
I was going to address that.
It's a big one.
Yeah.
Okay. What are people's thoughts on the role of? Yeah, that's the thing. It's going to need a little bit more time, and I was just going to, Ben, I'm sorry, but it's not about lack of time. Also, I'm going to use your question as an opportunity now, which is that Daniel and other people want to hear and how they're going to solve stuff, how they're going to solve very practical problems of working in this time. And for that, we have a group on this app called Telegram. And I will send the link to everybody who's registered for this. And feel free to join the group. I'll send it right after this. It'll be emails saying join Unrehearsed Futures on Telegram, so that you can carry this conversation forward. You can keep answering these questions, including the question that we're missing from Ben Volchok. I'm really sorry about that, Ben. So that's the first thing. The second one was Gio spoke about the Amy and Gio both spoke about the political act, and the next two talks are going to be about, one is from the University of Cape Town and one is from Hong Kong. And it's about COVID, and it's a question that was personally interesting to me, which is multiple disruptions. The pandemic is just one. I came from another conversation that said, if you think the pandemic is anything, you haven't seen the environmental story of when we hit tipping point, or we've hit tipping point. Environmental disaster that is coming is going to leave this thing looking like a blip on the screen. And so what are we doing in a time of multiple disruptions? What are we preparing our students for in a time of multiple disruptions, in ongoing disruption, in perpetual disruption? And that is the question that we are exploring in the next two, because one of them is about China and Hong Kong. But whilst Janice will maybe not, for exactly the same reasons Gio spoke about, not speak about anything directly on that, she will speak about the need for what she is doing at the Hong Kong Academy of Performing Arts and keeping her kids going in the context of that. And I think it'll be similar with the story from Cape Town. And it's good to have these stories, because it was almost as a contrast to Edward Hicks, who has the luxury of the Oxford School of Drama and the ability to go out into large green fields and have classes in marquee tents. And this is very different. So that's there. All chats will be available. All videos will be available. This discourse is continuing. Amy, can I speak about your curatorial act coming forward? I am, the last conversation I have curated is right after Janice and Sarah's and this, and then we have, oh my God, Faye Simpson from the US. We're moving the time to 5 p.m. in order to allow them to wake up a little later. Otherwise, she'd have to do the talk at 6:30. She is the founder of the Lucid Body Technique, and she's going to be speaking probably to Sita. And then after that, I hand over the conversations to Amy for curation, because Amy is going to curate them in interesting dyads. We look forward to hearing those conversations. But at some point, Unrehearsed Futures is going to flip. And it was prompted by Judith, because Judith said, I would love to see how your course pans along. I would love to hear from Daniel about how his direction goes along. I would love to hear from anybody who's taking steps in this time. So the conversations will move from a, well, what next, to, well, how's it going now that you've started on this journey and down these roads? And then, you know, I'm sure Kali will be speaking, and all of us will be speaking, because we'll have very real lived experiences of teaching in this time. So you will get an email from me. Get on the Telegram group if you want to keep the conversation going. Ask questions, answer questions, and share stories and share ideas. And Telegram, by the way, is very government search, Nazi, Gestapo proof, which is why we chose the medium. We chose it because the fascists can't come and get us there for now. For now. We will always find a way to go further underground. And with that, I think that we should close this session with a great thank you and a little bit of a performance from Kimberly, L, Angela, and Lily. So you have to get off mute and go for it. Oh no, right, stop the recording. Okay, thank you everybody. Lovely, well, and speak to you all soon, and love from India to the world.
Love from Australia.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you.
Sorry about the screaming in your headphones. Ben! I love how Ben like puts himself off mute right at the end. There you go. I will keep the room open. One of the things we've decided for the course is we're going to keep the rooms open for 15 to 20 minutes afterwards in a very informal way, so that you don't feel that sense of a chop. Hi, Ben. Ben, you're on mute and you're typing. You're multitasking, like Daniel said. Do you guys know Ben? Amy, you know Ben? Gio, you know? Yeah. Okay, he's staying on mute for whatever reason. He wants to stay on mute. Ben and I explored something with Ben and I explored something with the previous batch, which is, now that you're in this mediated medium, how can you transpose, how can you take those things that you felt so strongly that were theatrical in the lived and present space, and what can you, not recreate, but since you know that and that existed there, can you give somebody in this space an experience of that? And so we call it transferences and transpositions, and it was interesting. We're trying to develop it further, find a home for a new program. Yeah.
Yes. No, it's interesting, because the conversation that splits between training and then and creation, as sort of these, in other words, because I almost feel like the challenges are more difficult in training than they are in creation, because the creation side seems to very much be about how do you take the ethos of theater making and begin to apply it to anything and everything. And sort of, and what Jehan was talking about was very much, you know, began with a sort of an analysis of what is the ethos of being a theater maker. What are the sort of, you know, what's the framework that you work within? What do you know? And then applying that becomes sort of taking a sense of that and then beginning to apply it really to anything. But then that more that question of how you, but that's drawing on, you know, the fact that, you know, we have some of these, you know, couple years of training and years of experience making to then sort of begin to apply that. How you implant that sense of that collectivity, and I love this thing about the poetic body being the collective body, through this kind of a medium is a really interesting question. How you instill that.
Well, we're choosing in the first 6 months not to instill that. It's the shared experience is going to be the fact that we all trained together to develop ourselves individually. To start with, we have kept some room and some space in the name of community building and in the name of feeling together. So scratch nights, just coffee sessions, things like that. But the actual act of and we've kept 2 labs called collaborative creation. But what we're creating, is it theater? No. What are we creating? How we do that? And exactly this, with a group of initiates, like the module you ran with us on transposition and transference was something that happened at the end of 9 months of training. Yeah. We couldn't do that with these kids right now. And we don't know, at the end of 6 months, we'll sort of wonder, can we do that with these kids now? But what we're really hoping is at the end of 6 months, we're going to go into a residential COVID bubble. Worst comes to worst, we're going to go into a residential COVID bubble. Best comes to best, we'll find ways of getting people to start training together in small groups in the city.
No, like Daniel, I've just found out I'm supposed to go back into a rehearsal room in the beginning of November. And again, it's going to be a super regulated within an educational environment. So I'm also very curious to see I sort of see it as like this sort of this directorial challenge of how do you make something that has to follow all of these, you know, all of these prescribed rules essentially. And it's sort of like, okay, yeah, gauntlet thrown. Let's see how we can make this work. But at some level, the rules also make no sense in terms of, you know, because in theory, as a cast, we're supposed to be a bubble. But the bubbles are beyond the bubbles extend to new bubbles and they go on and on. So,
yeah.
But no,
the reality of what I'm about to do is we're going to practice social distancing in the rehearsal room, wearing masks, and then people will go home to their flats. People who, myself included, who aren't doing that and going out. And I mean, and the whole thing is predicated on fear, because if one person gets ill, then by the guidance, everyone needs to self-isolate in the group. If someone gets ill in the final 2 weeks, there's no show. I mean, it will be a fascinating experience to do a rehearsal, to do this with so much stuff around it. I'll let you know what, and I'm sure it will also be perfectly okay, because these things always are. You manage, you make.
I just had a thought. Hello, my name is Elizabeth. I'm in Melbourne at the moment, where we have to wear masks, like it's a regulation when we're outside. And I'm working with a friend to devise some work. We meet in the park for the hour we're allowed outside. And one thing I have noticed about wearing masks is that you get really focused on the body, because it's the only way you can show, like you do mask takes really well, Giovanni, because you're like checking and and you have to express yourself through the body, because this whole part of your face is missing. So I think you'll find that in your rehearsals, like you might get more physicality, or you might, it'll be complicity will be in the eyes a lot.
This would be.
Hi, Giovanni.
Hey, Elizabeth. Yeah, there can be a resurgence of mass theater because of this.
Yeah, lava masks would be great.
Yeah, you even have your surgical mask under the mask.
I'm really curious. Romina is here, and Romina comes from an amazing long lineage of street and community performance in her region in Italy. Amazing. And Romina, what are you finding? Are you playing with your masks, or how are you manifesting?
Oh, now what Giovanni said, the way it's much was the situation. You heard me or not?
It's a bit difficult to hear you.
Yeah, because the connection is not so good. Sorry.
Okay.
It's difficult. Yes, it's difficult to master to learn.
No, can't hear you at all. Trying.
We can't hear you. Sorry, Romina.
Ah.
The eyes are
But
great.
it's very dramatic though.
Yeah, but my voice, no. Maybe it would be so. No, please.
Okay. Well,
Now, but
no. No.
now it's
Good.
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 Yeah, okay, much better. So we play with the mask, but it's so strange because you heard me or not?
Yeah.
Jumpy.
Yeah, okay. A little bit. You don't see me. I don't.
No, lift it, lift it.
Okay. So is is strange because if you see it,
No.
It's a great sound, but we can't hear anything.
So here's what we're going to do, Romina. We're going to give
the Zoom
we're going to give you
play all together.
just join Unrehearsed Telegram
Zoom
chat.
is not so good.
It's not
No,
good.
we don't like
It's
it.
not good. Also the mask, because you need to clean the mask every time because you put your face and continue to clean the mask every time.
I'm going to stop the recording now.